Hare Krishna.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
go ahead. You like to say a few words?
Oh, yes. I figured maybe you would start with something, but for now, I'll just say thank you for once again chatting with me and associating with me. Goswami ji, you're the best. Today, you're going to initiate me, which is an incredible mercy and honor and pleasure. I'm not speechless because I'm speaking, but I am. I am wordless on the best way to glorify you, your grace, and properly even conceptualize kind of what's going on now. So actually, I was hoping we could begin by saying like, what are we actually doing here? Like for a modern, very secular person like my family, like what is this? What what is this initiation exactly? Is I might describe
well, okay. Since you mentioned secular, I'm going to get into that. Secular, as I understand it, comes from a Latin word meaning world, and it's so it's literally means like worldly. Let's see the etymology of secular. From Old French séculaire, from Latin secularis, from saeculum, generation, age. Used in Christian Latin to mean the world as opposed to the church. So, yeah, so first of all, secular, there actually was a movement which was victorious in terms of becoming dominant, historical movement toward secularization. If you look at, actually, why not jump into this topic, right? It's all right. But I just want you to know at this point, no refunds. We've gone past that point, but
oh darn.
So if you look at the way human societies, cultures have structured themselves or understood themselves for thousands of years, certainly most of the time, you could almost say, or you could say almost most of the time, or almost all the time, societies were not secular in the sense that there was a consensus that reality is not merely physical. And so in a sort of a stunning testimony to the utter lack of common sense nowadays, that has become sort of a controversial topic. In other words, is the world merely physical? Is it also metaphysical? That's a topic we won't get into here, although there's, I think, overwhelming evidence that the world is bidimensional, both metaphysical and physical. Our political system is based on that assumption, equality, not an empirical fact, but a metaphysical fact. But in any case, so most societies in history have understood that because our political or social or economic system should somehow be in sync with, it should be integrated with reality and not irreality. And since reality is both physical and metaphysical, our political and social and economic systems should somehow reflect the real nature of the world. And so therefore, rather than, they had non-secular society, they had society in which it was considered, for example, if you look at Roman society, it was considered a civic duty to show certain respect and honor, to make certain offerings to the gods as they conceived them. Interestingly, in Roman society, there was religious freedom. no one really cared very much who you ultimately prayed to save your soul. But it was understood that just as we have certain administrative hierarchy in our human society, so there is a cosmic administration, a cosmic hierarchy, and therefore showing certain honor to, let's say, Jupiter or other Roman gods was simply a civic duty. You did that. It's in the same way you pay your taxes. For example, you may be a let's say an enthusiastic booster of the city you live in. You really, you belong to the Rotary Club or whatever, but you also have to pay federal taxes. The fact that you, let's say, identify with your state, you're into your state, you're into your city, and all that. Like where I grew up in Los Angeles, they call people Angelinos. Perhaps not the best choice, but that's what they call people from LA. So, or New Yorkers and so on. So you may be an enthusiastic member of your community, but you still have to pay federal taxes. And so for the Romans, let's say honoring the gods was something like paying your federal taxes as opposed to your state or city taxes, which was, paid to the actual Roman human beings. And so one could argue that, well, because we have freedom of religion, we can't have a state religion, or we don't want a religion favored by the state. And there's, given the history of the West, that was probably a really great idea, given all the brutality and cruelty and just unspeakable evil that was perpetrated in the name of religion. It probably was a good idea to decouple religion and society. However, I would say that in itself doesn't necessarily make a society strictly secular, because you could have certain higher values which must have a religious base. Actually, secular democracy is kind of a contradiction. It's sort of a contradiction. The word secular democracy, or what's that fancy word, oxymoron, which means a very unintelligent, castrated bull. Oxymoron. But anyway, oxymoron anyway. So I would argue that the words secular and democracy are somewhat contradictory, because democracy is based on the notion that we're all equal, but that's a religious idea. It's not an empirical idea. Although they try to make it empirical, but you won't even get into that whole quagmire of race analysis and all that. Suffice it to say that just on an individual level, look at all white people, all Asian Americans, all black people. Just look within a race. You don't get into that whole thing with race. People aren't equal. For example, in California, where I grew up, they have public universities. University of California has some status, and everybody doesn't get in. In fact, some campuses like UCLA and Berkeley are extremely competitive, almost like Ivy League schools. So there you have a public university. It's not even private. You could say, well, a private school can do what they want. They can have their own selection process. Like you have to be a Christian, or you have to be, this, or you have to be that. But here you have a public university in a secular society, which does not treat people, gives them equal opportunity, but doesn't treat them as equal, because they're not equal. Some people get in, some people don't. If you try out, let's say you try out for a college basketball team. Again, it's public. It belongs to the public. It's a state institution. And yes, some people make the team, some people don't make the team. So if you're trying out for a basketball team, if you're trying to get into a prestigious university, if you're trying to get a good grade in a class, you're trying to win the, sweet Mary Lou or something, or Mary Lou's trying to win sweet, I don't know, Bobby Goo or whatever it is, in terms of, trying to attract someone from the opposite sex, you're not equal. So where do you find people are actually equal? Certainly not in applying for jobs, not in applying for universities, not in athletic competitions, not in musical competitions, not in the sort of the brutal battleground of free market competition. So where do you find it? And yet we've based our whole political system on that, and our judicial system and everything. And so therefore, if you say democracy is based on equality, equality is it's not a mundane concept. It's a metaphysical concept. So what that proves is if you believe there is such a thing as secular democracy, that means you believe something can be metaphysical and secular at the same time. If that's the case, then one could argue simply that you can expand the inventory of metaphysical items which are considered appropriate within a secular society as public truths. Because if you have that one public truth of equality, which is obviously not empirical, then why not other public metaphysical truths? And if you do that, then at what point do you cross a line from the secular into the, I don't know, maybe there's a middle ground between secular and non-secular. You call it qualified secularism or qualified non-secularism, but still. So therefore, to say people are secular, I think it sounds intelligible, but I think upon further investigation, it's one of those innumerable words which is used somewhat thoughtlessly nowadays, because there's very little which is actually thoughtful nowadays. But anyway, so as far as the initiation, it's an honest way to make a living for the guru. Just kidding. It's so initiation, the Sanskrit word is diksha. And it simply means that that one, so to speak, signs on the dotted line. If you look at sort of the nature of contracts, or sort of a nicer word, which sounds less crassly capitalistic, is a covenant. Mm. It's funny because contract sounds kind of
mercenary. Almost.
Yeah, whereas covenant sounds sort of like, I don't know, the Old Testament or the New Testament, the New Covenant, so on. But a covenant is a contract. It's an agreement. And so we find in almost all areas of life is that when people are entering into relationships with other people or with groups, and they're serious about it, they agree to something. There's a formal agreement, which may be actually in writing. It may be registered with the government, as in the case of a deed. A deed, let's say you purchase a property and you get a deed, and so you register that. But, and of course, in the Old Testament, the Jewish nation is known as the people of the covenant, in the sense that they have a covenant with God. And then you get a new movement, Christianity, claiming that God has sort of, I'm going to tear up that old contract and I'm going to give you a better deal. And so that was the whole idea. That was the argument for the Jesus movement. And I won't go into the history of that, which is quite a history. But the idea was that God is going to give you a better deal. He's going to tear up that old contract, and he's going to refinance your salvation at a lower interest rate or something. So it's the new covenant. That was the whole idea. This is now the new, currently valid covenant. If people make formal agreements to attend universities, they sign contracts for everything from baseball teams to the purchase of buildings. And so if you just look at life, marriage is a covenant. It's a sacred covenant in which two people promise certain things to each other. So one could argue, in fact, I will argue or claim here, that in virtually every serious aspect of human life, and by serious, I mean where something really important is at stake, people enter into formal agreements. And
Mm.
so the same holds true in spiritual life, because after all, it is a form of spiritual education. Just like if you go to Harvard, or if you go to Slippery Rock, which is the Harvard of its region, then you sign an agreement. You actually, let's say, you apply to a college. If they accept you, then you sign on the dotted line that you will do certain things, you'll attend that school. So every area of life. So spiritual life also, we commit ourselves. It's a bhakti yoga is a covenant process. And the covenant is simply initiation.
I really like that word covenant. It's really accurate to what's going on, which is, for me, from my perspective, I've been doing this sadhana, this spiritual practice for a while now, but to be able to publicly and explicitly declare, this covenant, this vow to continue and to really stay on track and to advance more in the future and so on. Um, that's what I'm here to do.
Another satisfied customer.
Yes, another satisfied customer. So I figured, well, I have just some questions about,
Sure.
The specifics about rules and regulations and the vow and so on. And then there's the initiation ceremony. And then if we have free time, we can talk about other things. And I don't actually mind which order we do this in, but I figured we'd, just continue with the questions for a bit.
Okay, well, go ahead. If you have questions, go ahead.
Okay, so the first part of the vow, which is, I think, the simplest and most straightforward, is mantra meditation, chanting mantras 16 times 108 every day. My only question on this concerns carryover rounds. Like you
Yeah.
have with the phone plans, or you have like the carryover minutes.
Yeah, you can carry. Yeah, if you don't finish one day, you can make it up the next day.
Yeah, so this is something
and I'm willing to waive. I'm willing to waive all the penalties too.
Oh wow, today's really my lucky day. So, from most of the devotees and bhakti yoga practitioners I've met, it seems like, if you do like 15 rounds one day and then 17 rounds the next day to make up for it, that's not so bad. But if you have, like, let's say tomorrow you're really busy with work, so you do like 18 today and 14 tomorrow, is that the same thing, or is there something
Yeah,
different?
that's not really kosher.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that feeling too, but I'm not sure, like,
well, I would explain it this way, because premeditated, not chanting your rounds is, so let's say every day we wake up with the intention to keep our vow. And so if some days it's just we're overwhelmed by other things we have to do, and somehow we're not able to do it, then we make it up. But that's not premeditated. That's just, you do your best, and if there's a little problem, the next day you repair it.
Right. So in this example, it seems the easy thing to do is, well, I'll do the best I can today. Let's say I get 14, and then the next day I'll do the best I can. I should get 16 at least, hopefully 17, 18, whatever. And yeah, just keep going. But
Yeah, the easiest thing is just to get in the habit of doing 16 every day. I know, life is very frantic nowadays, but yeah, and if you're 14, it's like, you don't want to stop for a break when the finish line is in view. It's like you see those things on YouTube where some guy's winning a race, start celebrating too soon, and someone else passes.
yes, that's similar things have happened in my life many times. The most recent I can remember was in the gym. I was doing judo, and I started to get this what's it called? The jump on my opponent, who was a higher rank than me. So I got so excited. I'm like, I got him, I win. And then I fell down prematurely and I injured my leg, and I couldn't even practice for a while. So that was like, clear lesson to remember.
Pride goes before the fall. Okay, so what other question?
Oh, and also, so that first question reminded me of the theme I have for this whole kind of questioning segment, which is I'm not trying to like premeditate some cheat for the system. I'm just trying to, well, clarify what the vow actually is. And also, this is just my favorite thing to do, which is like do like philosophical, ethical kind of discourse. You might call it a rabbinical process. I don't know, something like this, which is just fun for me to do.
So the number 16, 16, rounds on beads, or 16 times 108, is not an absolute number. It was Prabhupada's sort of considered judgment, informed decision on what was not. It was sort of the Goldilocks number. It was not too much and not too little. And because in India, his guru's society, they actually did more, but Prabhupada figured that this is what people can do nowadays, not too much and not too little.
Yes. Yeah, that's something I'm very aware of. Like, it's so perfect. This is another reason I'm so happy to be initiated, because Srila Prabhupada is incredible. I mean, he nailed everything so perfectly, and he basically saved my soul. So this is kind of the least I can do, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, Sweet 16.
Yes, Sweet 16.
Maybe we could do a remake of that old song, 16 Candles, the 16 rounds or something.
I have ideas of this all the time, of like modern rock songs, but you just add in like Krishna instead of like My Baby or whatever. I think that'll
So another question.
Yes, so that's it for japa and mantras. Moving on to the 4 rules and regulations, the 4 things not to do. I figured I'd start with gambling. This one's actually really another simple, easy thing, I think. So I don't like to gamble. I don't care about it. It's not an issue for me. But where I think it might come into play or effect is with investing and stocks and cryptocurrency, these sorts of things, especially in this modern, digital world. It's getting really confusing where the line is. So the way I see it is like day trading is gambling. So if I'm buying and selling stocks like 5 times a day to get $100 profit or whatever, just to like get profit day by day, that's, to me, that's gambling.
Yeah, it is kind of like an addiction.
Yeah, yes. So that's the addictive aspect is there in the day trading stuff.
I would say in stocks, as you know, in all investments, all financial instruments, there's a ratio where some things are more risky and potentially could yield a higher return. Some things will very likely give a lower return, but are much less risky. And so I would say if one is getting too far on that continuum toward high risk, possible high return, I think at that point it starts to get more, it's not just investing. It's kind of like, because it's like, if you throw the little balls down the roulette wheel, it's not a science unless you're like really good at that. But and so it's really, I think, in fact, a common name for gambling is a game of chance. And I think it's that thing where you sort of disconnected reward from deserving or reward from merit. So that if you earn something or you deserve something, it's natural. There's sort of a natural law in the universe that Krishna states in the Gita about people should get and ultimately do get under God what they deserve. So a game of chance is cutting that vital connection between deserving and receiving. And in that sense, it sort of it defies the basic principle of justice.
Mm.
Because if someone, let's say, like they say, he lucked out, if someone's like a game of chance, and someone, person that doesn't know what they're doing, just throws something down on the table and walks away with $1 million, you could say there's a higher justice because of karma. But this gets into the broader topic of, how the human world should somehow reflect the divine world, so that, for example, you could just walk down the street shooting people. I don't recommend this, but someone could walk down the street shooting people and saying, well, if it wasn't for their karma, it couldn't have happened. Let's say, even if that's true, but you can't take the law into your own hands. You can walk into the death row in your local penitentiary and just shoot all the condemned prisoners, but you're guilty of murder.
Mm.
So in that sense, even where higher principles are involved, like karma or whatever, we have to behave in this world on principles of justice. And games of chance are sort of rejecting that principle and saying that the whole purpose of my gambling here is to override the principle of justice and get not what I deserve, but just to get lucky.
Mm. You could kind of see it as like a difference between a need and a want, kind of like that. I want to just demonstrate, I guess, the opposite extreme. So the first one I mentioned is like you're day trading, hours every day, and it's addictive, and you get profit and loss, and you just keep playing this game. That's gambling to me. That would be against my vow. Now, on the other hand, if I, let's say, buy, I don't know, stock in Procter and Gamble with the intention of just holding it for like 20 years and just getting some dividend payments instead of just keeping it in a savings bank and getting slightly less interest. I mean, to me, that doesn't feel or seem like gambling at all, really.
No, if it's because, even let's say if I have money in the bank under the FDIC limit, so it's all federally insured, but God only knows, how long that's going to last, especially if certain kinds of people get power. So, because we're seeing now a whole political class that really cares very little about the Constitution.
Mm.
So, so in that sense, you could say, in the broadest construction, everything in this world is gambling. And when you turn the key of your ignition, actually, I'm dating myself. When you turn your car on, however you turn your car on, maybe, some character, maybe some Godfather wannabe, put some bomb in your engine. So, I mean, really everything, I mean, you could say that everything in this world is risky. It's a dangerous world, but still something like Procter and Gamble. And of course I have to I'm required to say that I'm in no way endorsing Procter and Gamble. I'm not encouraging my disciples to buy Procter and Gamble ingredients for their personal hygiene. And I'm just kidding. You have to read this little thing, my lawyer gave me. But yeah, so I think the more it is not gambling, the more it is just, you could say, administration rather than gambling. You have a certain amount of money, you want to protect it. And so therefore you find some safe haven for your money. I think the main reason people lose money, based on a lifetime of observation, is greed.
Mm.
Because even like Procter and Gamble, if I'm going to maybe earn a few $100s more per year, but it's all at risk, as opposed to, let's say, having it in the bank where I make literally a few $100s less, but there's no risk, then I'm just going to keep it in the bank, because to me, the peace of mind that I have is worth many times more than a few $100s. I think it's funny how people get all worked up and stressed out by their financial maneuvers, and maybe they make a few $1,000 more here or there, but then they spend 5 times that much on vacations and pharmaceuticals and just trying to recover from all the anxiety they got themselves in. So that's just me personally. I would rather take a very cautious, safe, peaceful approach and just think about Krishna.
Amen. Peace. Yeah, peace is like, I don't know, maybe you could call it a cardinal virtue, but I do remember there's some verses in the Gita where Krishna talks about how if there's no peace, there's no intelligence.
No
And if there's
happiness.
no intelligence, there's
No.
no happiness. You
Krishna
remember
says,
it more than me.
yeah, it's ashantasya kutak sukham. Where is peace? No, where is happiness for for a person that's not peaceful? Where is it? Like, rhetorical? Where is happiness? Like,
Yeah.
where is the question of happiness? So, next question.
Yes. All right, gambling done. Moving on to, my favorite, intoxicants.
Yes.
So, if I were to kind of step out of my Bhaktivedanta bias, if that makes sense, and define like what is an intoxicant, I would actually not include entheogens in that category.
Include what?
Entheogens.
What are
So
entheogens?
it's a fancy word for psychedelics, basically. But entheogen, literally, I think the difference is entheogen means natural, like a plant.
How do you spell that? How do you spell it?
I can put it in the chat here. Entheogen. Entheogen. The root, it might come from the same root as theism, right?
I would say it does go in the category of intoxicants for a simple reason. An obvious reason. Put another coin in the meter and I will tell you. So, and that is for this, it's really for the same reason as gambling. It violates the principle of justice, in the sense that the real way one achieves peace and happiness and higher awareness is by earning it.
Mm.
And so an entheogen, I would put in the category of to use the sort of dramatic term, prohibited substance, because it's an attempt to get a shortcut. It's an attempt to achieve a higher state of consciousness without earning it.
Now, so I agree, and especially from, well, there's many different perspectives floating around in my head, but what if, for argument's sake, that I am not doing, if a person is not is not doing it for a shortcut, but doing it as a just spiritual religious ritual in itself, kind of like ayahuasca. Maybe you've heard of that, but there's many of these.
I would just say, in relation to what I already said, I would just come in with a ditto there. I think that psychotropic drugs may be justified if, let's say, someone has some type of emotional or mental ailment, and to bring them back to a baseline, to bring them back to sort of because to make them functional, to make them, to avoid, let's say, suicidal impulses or aggressive impulses. So
right.
So I think, it is possible, if we can just sort of put aside all the sophistry, it is possible to talk about normal consciousness. It's not an enlightened state, but it's not a neurotic or, let's say, emotionally unwell state. It's just sort of normal conscious where you can function in the world. I think drugs or medications, which are required, meaning that their benefits cannot be achieved in other less invasive ways, but those kinds of medicines which are required just to bring one to a functioning state where he or she can just live, quote unquote, a normal life, that's justified. But if you want to go beyond that and achieve states of higher awareness, then you have to earn it.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. I have lots of personal experience here. That is, I mean, I've literally cheated, and I've felt the effects of like the being a good cheat and a bad cheat. Like I've already done this whole thing. This is why I'm like, it's time to get initiated, because I don't need to do that anymore at all. Like it's just, if I was like 16 or something, like it'd be a different story. But sweet 16. Um, so another thing that may come up in my future life, and it will give me a what's the word, quandary, difficulty, confusion, something, is not using or abusing an intoxicant, but like tasting an intoxicant or socially, as part of a social thing. Because so I can give
Yeah,
you.
I would say if you do it socially, you're really wasting a great teaching moment. Because, I mean, if you, let's say, there's some party or event and you say, yeah, I actually don't drink alcohol, it's not like spitting in someone's face or kicking them in the shins or calling them some bad name. I mean, it's obviously within your right, and you can be a perfect gentleman and a perfect host or a perfect guest and not to drink. So I think there are some ways in which we should fit in. We should ingratiate ourselves, just be nice people, but it doesn't mean we have to violate our principles. And so I can't imagine. For example, when I was at Harvard, in my department, Sanskrit and Indian studies, they had this little Friday afternoon, early evening get together, trying to sort of promote camaraderie, collegiality in the department. And so Friday, I can't remember what time it was, maybe 5 o'clock or 4 or 5 o'clock, whatever it was. We'd meet there in the department, and there'd be crackers and cheese and wine. And I never drank the wine, and no one was. I mean, it would be absurd for someone to be offended by that. And I was friends with everyone. We had really good relations with everyone. I didn't have to drink the wine to be a nice guy.
Well, Goswami, there is actually to me, there's a big cultural thing here. That's a huge dimension. So in America, yes, I'm with you 100% on this, and it won't be an issue. What I'm actually thinking in my head is like East Asia. For example, if I were to marry a rural Vietnamese girl and I meet her father, he's gonna, or Chinese too, like there's many nations like this where he'll say, okay, you want to marry my daughter, you have to do more shots than me, you have to drink me under the table so I know you're a man, and then you can marry my daughter. So
Do
in
they
these,
really? Do they really do that?
yeah, and it's not like an optional thing. A lot of times it's just not, it's like a very um so like
How did they win the war with a culture like that?
well, there is the whole history of the Vietnam War, for example. um
I think that for one thing, if let's say you want to marry a girl, which means you want to spend your life with her, it is in a culture like that where family is important. I would say it would be dangerous for you to marry a girl who, number one, thinks so little of your spiritual practice. It's like, why are you marrying her? Or number two, is so much controlled by her family that she would expect you, in order for her to marry you, to do something which she knows goes against your spiritual practice. I think that would be an extremely inauspicious way
Mm.
to get married. Because if she's so heavily influenced by her father that she would even ask you or want you to violate your sacred vows, then that means that after you're married, it's going to be a pretty rough road. And
Yes.
because when people get married, if you marry someone, you want to have a relationship where you work things out among yourselves. It's not the girl goes running to daddy or the guy goes with his mother. That's even kind of like more bizarre. But, and so in order for a marriage to be successful, it's important that two people work things out between them. So if the girl doesn't just step in and just tell her father, hell no, that's crazy. You don't understand who I am. You don't understand who this man is. If the girl's not going to stand up for you in that situation, she's not going to stand up for you later. And you're going to have a terrible and probably very brief marriage.
Mm. Thank you, Goswami. That's really the broad perspective there. Bring it in nicely. Just one more little question on intoxicants. As you know, I'm a Campanella.
You're not going to ask my favorite beer or anything, are you? Because I never drank beer in my life.
Wow.
Cool. I thought just the smell of it was disgusting. And anyway, I won't do my rant on beer right now.
Well, as an ex-brewer, I promise I won't.
An ex-brewer.
Yeah, in my college days in Vermont, I was winemaking and brewing and doing lots of fun stuff. But it's just a hobby, not something I'm attached to or anything. Okay, so as a Campanella who has never been to Italy, my ancestral homeland, I can romanticize a scenario where I meet my Campanellas, my families in Sicily, and they say, "Oh, you finally come back home. It's so great, and you have to try this wine that we."
No. Because first of all, if people, you can't. There's no way you're going to develop a meaningful, lasting relationship with people if you just hide everything about yourself. Then they're just relating to this fictitious little persona you've thrown up in front of them. And so if I was you, and if I was going to go visit le mie, my people in Italy, I think before I went, I'd send them pictures, videos, maybe do una zoom. Dove fare una zoom. And so they get to know you. I mean, you don't want to do any cold calling. If you're trying to practice spiritual life, you don't just like show up in Sicily. What you do is you write to them, you meet on Zoom, you explain yourself. This is what I do. Another thing is you could pull on them is that I Romani antichi, the ancient Romans, they were practically vegetarian. Their big power food was chickpeas. For one thing, meat doesn't last; it gets rotten. It's just if you study the history of Roman warfare, which I have, it's very interesting because a lot of it is agility. If you've got this whole big herd of ox you're going to slaughter, you're going to be about as agile as Humpty Dumpty, and so. No, they were agile. You need to be able to move quickly. They carried these bags on their belt that had chickpeas for protein. So yeah, that's the thing. it's one thing to be nice and friendly. It's another thing just to capitulate every time someone, they stand up for their principles. Why don't you stand up for yours? It's like you're putting them above you.
Mm.
It's one thing to say, okay, we're devotees. We know we're the greatest thing since, I don't know, buttered corn on the cob. So it's one thing. So we say, okay, even though you're a spiritual practitioner, even though you're one of these most fortunate people that knows Krishna, still just be a regular guy, don't put yourself above people. That makes sense, but you don't put yourself below them.
Well, what about, I see your point, but
So you
at
should
this,
get
at
to,
this,
I think you should really get to know people a little bit, and they should know you. They should know who you are. They should know who you are, and they should know that, for example, let's say in a typical Italian family, especially in the old days, few generations ago, it's like in these big Italian families, one of the boys would become a priest. Like every big Italian family would give one boy to the church. And so if you're, let's say your brother or your son or your nephew, whatever, is coming for a family dinner, you don't try to set him up with, with little Lulu or something. You don't try to set him up with some good looking girl from your neighborhood. Because everybody else in the extended family, they have wives or husbands or girlfriends or boyfriends. This guy's a priest. So in their own religion, they make exceptions. They understand that religious people have special vows they follow. So the Italians, frankly, more than most people, can understand religious vows. And that's our experience. And because I was, in charge of Italy for a while, the co-GVC, and I speak Italian, and I really like Italy. I always have a great time when I go there. And so I spent time in Italy. I know something about Italy. In my experience, of course, Sicilia is, that's Sicilia. But my experience in general with Italians is that they tend to be kind of cosmopolitan about religious things. They really understand that, religious people make vows.
Sorry, what do you mean by cosmopolitan in this sense?
I mean, they're sophisticated. They're not just like little village people that everyone has to be like us. Now, it depends on who your relatives are in Sicily, But many Italians that I've met, if you explain to them that I'm a priest, or that I have I'm dedicated to a religious path or spiritual path, and we make certain vows, the Italians understand that more than most Europeans. They respect the fact that when you take up a religious vocation, you make special vows. So my experience in Italy is there's a lot of sympathy for stuff like that, a lot of respect.
This is really good news. I feel much more motivated to visit Italy and much more strong to maintain my vow at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, no offense, but if it was a Greek island, then that might be a little more difficult. But Athens probably wouldn't be a problem. But no, my experience in Italy, people tend to be open-minded. They have sort of a mature understanding of religion. There are different religions, and you take vows, and they understand those things. I mean, if you didn't eat the spaghetti and you're allergic to olive oil, I think that would be a much bigger problem.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, a big part of this is I'm not totally in knowledge about Italian culture.
No, my experience is Italians tend to be nice people. If you take the time to explain to them, especially the fact that a religious person, has some special rules to follow, they understand that.
Excellent. Okay, so I think oh no, there's one more hard question concerning illicit sex. So
that's funny. You sound like to illicit sex, which means to kind of try to obtain it, to elicit sex. Yeah, no eliciting sex.
So I'm just going to ask you, and you can respond however you want. I know this is a gross topic. No one wants to. I don't
Oh,
think
I don't
anyone actually.
mind. To me, it's just philosophy. As one of my personal heroes once said, bring it on.
Good,
So,
good, very good. I'm the same way with philosophy. I'm thinking more about other people listening to this. I'm trying to keep it brief for them. But basically, concerning my vow, strictly, I mean, like specifically the vow I'm taking, not so much in general, because I already know all the principles. That's pretty easy. But in terms of the vow, what do we think of porn, masturbation, and in general, orgasming? Are these all three not allowed, considered illicit
oh,
sex?
that's a very pleasant dinner table topic. I would look at that. Natalie is hiding her face behind her glass. I would say that it's obviously, not a great idea. I mean, I don't want to rate them, but I think that to be honest, none of those things are, we should do. I mean, we should avoid all those things, but actually having an illicit connection with another person, I think is even worse, because you're engaging someone else, and it's what's that euphemism they use? Pleasuring oneself. So I think yeah, I mean, obviously we should avoid all those things.
Right, right. So that's the principle that I have no I'm totally secure about in
Yes.
knowledge and buddhi, you could say. What I guess I'm not concerned about as much as like kind of a problem with maybe how this is worded is that I could technically, you know, be celibate, never have sex with someone else, never masturbate, but I could watch porn all day, and that might be
Well,
considered
it's
okay by the vow. So it's like, you
well, as
know,
far as pornography, um, I mean, clearly there's something wrong there. If you're trying to be a serious spiritual practitioner, I remember at Harvard Divinity School, there was one guy, his name was Ron something. I can't remember his name, but he was a nice guy. He was in the admissions committee or something. In fact, when I was applying, I even had a little exchange with him, and somehow it was discovered that he was using at work on his Harvard computer. He was doing porn. And so it was, I mean, they didn't behead him or anything or even castrate him, but he was, it was considered to be inappropriate. And then they kind of worked it out. I mean, they were kind of nice about it, but yeah, pornography is, first of all, it places one deeply in the bodily concept of life. And it is really based on, if you go into the psychology of lust, it's really based on lording it over someone else. I mean, the whole point of, especially say for a man, in enjoying a woman, because it's the men that do pornography, despite kind of like pathetic attempts to say the sexes have the same psychology and everything, but it's really more a man's thing, and which proves they're more intelligent. That was a joke. So if you look at the whole psychology behind pornography, it's subjugating, and it's totally subjugating, even humiliating, dominating another person. In other words, it's perhaps it's one of the most intense, illusory experiences of lording it over this world. So clearly, doing porn because technically I didn't break the principles. It's like some kind of, like, I don't know, perverse gotcha moment. It's like I beat the system. I mean, clearly, it's going to seriously damage one's spiritual life.
Yes, absolutely. I think the main reason I have to ask about this is because, like you said, this is a problem for men, and it's a very serious problem for male-bodied persons.
Yeah, yeah. To use the sort of the easy and very brief ISKCON term, male-bodied living entities as opposed to men. So much shorter, but much less descriptive, single syllable, monosyllabic word, men. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously certain things are just, we just shouldn't do them. And if someone has an addiction or something like that, then, you know, work on it. Just recognize it, that it's, I shouldn't be doing this. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean someone's a bad person or evil or should be cast out of society and, you know, locked in a room and forced to listen to public radio fundraising drives as the most cruel form of punishment imaginable. But yeah, but if someone does have that bad habit, then they should sincerely endeavor to overcome it.
I agree completely. And fortunately, I don't have any addictions to any of this stuff. If I did, I'd be in a very different situation, I think. What else? Oh, this is interesting. Onions and garlic are technically not against my vow, but as you know, this is a very common or standard thing in
I guess,
ISKCON.
yeah, by some people considered to be just slightly below cow killing. You know, it's
Yeah.
as far as
just slightly. Yeah.
as far as onion and garlic, I would say that first of all, it's a pan-Asian idea. So that, for example, in strict Thai restaurants, they don't use onion and garlic. It's the Buddhists. I mean, strict Buddhists don't eat onion and garlic. So it's not just India. It's not just devotees. It's not just India. It's actually a pan-Asian thing. And so they believe that ingesting, which is I could have just said eating, but I wanted to impress you. So ingesting onions and or garlic somehow harms or lowers or contaminates your consciousness. And I would say there would have to be some scientific basis for that.
I did see a very long lecture about this, and the devotee, the Prabhu, he mentioned that he mentioned many verses in different Vedic texts that, you know, that show how it is slightly less than cow killing to eat onions and garlic. But as far as I know, I don't know any Shastric references in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Chaitanya Charitamrita that mention onions and garlic. Am I right about that? Or is there some shlokas that we need to know?
Yeah. I don't know the Sanskrit word for onion and garlic. There must be one. But so I think it's an area where ultimately, I think I would defer to the science.
Yes, science.
In the sense that if we don't eat onions and garlic, Krishna Sundari. So if the onion and garlic, if we shouldn't eat them, there has to be a good reason for it, because it's obviously not ethical thing. It's not that actually garlic plants are really little people with highly developed consciousness. And so when you pull them out of the ground, I mean, it's, you know, it's so there has to be some scientific reason for it. And I don't know if there is. I don't know if it's just a belief coming from Asia, because it is a belief in Asia, or if actually scientifically it affects consciousness in a way which is so objectively undesirable that one should not eat those things.
I could see the case being made that onions and garlic promote like a Rajaguna mentality, so to speak, and this is not as good as Sattvic Guna.
Yeah, but then again, you'd have to. I know. I had a friend who was helping our movement who was in the Air Force. He was a flight engineer or something. And he said that they were told not to eat garlic right before flying because it kind of affected your reactions and everything. And so of course, then it has medicinal properties, but if you say, if you say it's in the, let's say in passion or something or ignorance, there has to be an explanation of that. In other words, because, for example, you could say drinking liquor is the mode of ignorance, but we can easily explain that neurologically. There's a very clear neurological explanation of why you shouldn't drink or take other drugs. And even marijuana causes all kinds of harm, although, some people don't want to look at the science on that. So as far as, if you look at the food that's typically offered to deities in Hare Krishna temples, a lot of it is just like blatantly passionate.
Yeah. That's why I brought it up, is because if that was the argument someone was making, then there's no gravity to that, I think.
So I would personally, not just because, I want to eat, fried onion rings or something, but I think it would be very good to find what is a scientific basis for that, for all the principles, whether it's, let's say, illicit sex or gambling or intoxication in general. The science is obvious. There's unlimited science to demonstrate why you shouldn't do those things.
Yes.
And even, for example, preserving the sanctity of marriage, not having sex outside of marriage. There's all kinds of social science research about that. So as far as onions and garlic, it would be nice if someone actually proved that there's significant harm from onions and garlic.
I do remember, now that we're talking about it, I did hear, I don't go into detailed research on any sort of science because I just don't care that much, but I think it has to do with the effect that garlic has on our nervous system. Like, that's why it's medicinal, is because it has that strong effect on our nervous system. I think that's why it's bad, is when you start to do it too much recreationally, then it's
but then again, we just need the science. That's all.
Yeah.
Someone needs to show us the science. I'm not saying that we should eat onions and garlic, but I want to see the science.
Yes, I'd be curious about that too. As long as you package it to me in a headline and a 30-second article, I'll be happy to read it.
So next question. So we're going a little overtime here. So next question.
Okay, almost done. Or are we done? Okay, here's a fun one. Oysters have no nervous system and they grow like plants. What is an oyster? Is it meat? Is it in between meat and plant life? What is an oyster?
God, I'm trying to remember that class I took in oysterology. Obviously I didn't. So again, it's according to their place in the animal kingdom, oysters are bivalve, you knew that, mollusks. That's the obvious thing. It's a bivalve mollusk, which means they are most technically not plants, not even fungus. Here's a whole article: oysters, vegan or not.
This is how I heard about it. I was on some vegan site and I started reading some things that, well, that's interesting.
Oysters protect their soft bodies by snapping their shells tightly closed at the first hint of dangers. Plants also have defensive response mechanisms. So I don't know. I don't oysters to me. It's just what does the science say? That's all. So next, hey Krishna Sundar.
I think that's it. That is definitely it. I don't like going into this too much, but these are just a few
But
questions.
the general principle is, and this is a big point in Krishna West, that just kidding. The big point is that I think we should be rational and we should be science-based. I personally practice Krishna consciousness because it's a spiritual science. And in everything in life, I try to act intelligently to the best of my ability. So things like oysters, things like onion, garlic, let's see the science.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, I have no more questions. If it's okay with you, Goswami, we can continue with the covenant.
The covenant, yes. Okay, so for initiation, as you know very well, you make a vow, and then I do a credit check, and then we see if we've got a deal.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you? So what is your vow?
Okay, my vow is to, from this day forward, chant every single day the Maha Mantra. I'm going to get confused on the math now. 16 times 108 times every day. 16 rounds
Yes.
of the Maha Mantra. I will do that every day. From now on, I will abstain from intoxicants, illicit sex, gambling, and meat eating. I promise to do these things.
Very good.
God as my witness and Goswami as my Diksha Guru. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, very good. So the name I chose for you because you are known in some circles as Ananda, isn't it?
In some circles, yes.
Yes. So there is. So I chose the name Vidyananda because Vidya means knowledge, scientific knowledge, and so, in fact, Ananda Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, it said that these are the gifts of Lord Chaitanya, Vidya, clear knowledge of reality, and Ananda, spiritual happiness. And actually, I had a godbrother, a very nice devotee named Vidyananda, who passed away very recently. And we are acquiring from his widow, who I also know is a nice devotee, his library. He was a serious book collector, Krishna conscious book collector. So we're acquiring his collection for our institute in Gainesville. And so you can continue that tradition of cultivating happiness through real knowledge, spiritual knowledge.
Excellent.
Vidyananda Das. I'll write it in chat with the diacritic mark. I won't. Let's see.
I get the diacritic marks too. Do I have to pay more for that, or?
You do, but I'm assuming you want the.
Oh yeah, no. You could give me extra diacritic marks. Actually, that'd be.
Vidyananda. Vidya, of course, comes from the root vid, which means to know, like Veda. And we still have many words in English from the Sanskrit root vid or Veda, such as video and vision and in Italian, the verb to see, because knowledge is always considered to be seeing, like the sages or seers, the verb to see in Italian is vedere. So if you say io vedo, I see, there's I see. Vedo means I see in Italian, of course, in the Latin. Okay, very good. Thank you for your sincere practice of Krishna consciousness. Krishna Sundari. Can everyone see Krishna Sundari? They can't? On Facebook? Yes, Krishna Sundari is my disciple, and her mother is my disciple. And Krishna Sundari, how old are you now?
I'm 18.
18. Very good girl. Very good, intelligent, very talented musician, songwriter. And so, do you have any message for everyone, for all the devotees? No pressure.
Do I have a message? Oh. Wow, it's a lot of pressure to put on me. I was just here for viewing.
Krishna Sundari's mother, Ananda Leela, handles all of our communications, programs, and everything.
Do you have a message? No.
Wait, that's Ananda Leela is the mother?
Yes, I know. No one believes that.
Yeah, they look like sisters.
Right?
Don't take that the wrong way, Krishna Sundari.
Yes, yes.
They're not saying that you look very old.
It's the opposite one. Yes.
I was about to be super offended.
Okay. So I think we've completed our program.
We have completed our program. On one final note, I will say there's actually one very massive thing we forgot, Goswami, which is preaching. So I remembered, it might have been on an email or in some correspondence, you said I should make the vow of japa and 4 rules and regs, and also try to do something to serve Prabhupada's movement.
Yes. Actually, Prabhupada had this simple initiation vow, 4 and 16. And so I think that we should not add on to that. It's like, that old saying, don't try to be more Catholic than the Pope. And so, I've heard sometimes like gurus will say, and, add on to the vow, but that's Prabhupada's vow. I will say that if we want to advance, if we want to really understand Krishna consciousness, we have to try to help others, because you can't, selfish people just don't make a lot of spiritual advancement. And so the more we try to help other people to understand Krishna, the more we understand it. No question.
So I was thinking, yes, I know this is not part of, the explicit vow, and we don't want to change Prabhupada's wishes here. But I was hoping, if you are happy with it, we could meet again in a month or two and do another show just on preaching in general, about maybe not so much in general, because you've talked about that so many times before, but maybe more personally, like how I can be best of service. And another burning question on my mind and heart is, where in the world should I live? Because I'm kind of homeless right now, and homeless in a good way, meaning I can actually, because of my job, I can live anywhere in the world. And I'm a little bit confused on where I should live and where I can be.
I think, okay, that's an easy question to answer, where you should live. And we can do another program later, just have to talk to Nanda Leela. And she just winds me up and points me. So as far as where to live, we should live in that place where we can best serve Krishna. And if we let other criteria intercede or take precedence, then we're not going to have a great life.
Yes.
It's like if you're a general leading your army into battle, and you say, well, we have to camp somewhere, and strategically we really need to be here, but I don't like the weather there, so let's make our camp somewhere else, or we have to choose a battlefield. This is the most strategic battlefield. I'm gonna go somewhere else because it has really nice flowers and there's a little river and it's really pretty. I mean, that's not, if you're a military leader, you can't make decisions on that basis. And so if we really want to dedicate ourselves to helping this planet, people love those blockbuster movies like, Tom Cruise and Bruce Willis. I guess, they're aging a little bit, but where people are trying to save the planet, either an asteroid's going to hit it or some alien invasion or, whatever. So when you're in that mode that you're trying to save the planet, all your decisions are strategic. They're not self-gratifying.
Mm.
And so one way to see that you're really in Krishna consciousness is that you make life decisions like where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do on strategic grounds, because if I do this, I can help the most people. And of course, there has to be a balance. You can't be too self-sacrificing. You have to give some consideration to your personal nature, your health needs, and things like that. You can't just, pretend like I'm a blank slate, because you're not. We're not blank slates. We have needs, we have natures, and so on. So we take consideration of that. But let's say all other things being equal. If all other things are equal, like I can satisfy my own basic needs in a number of places, then I go to that place where I can best serve. And if we're not thinking like that, we're not thinking like servants. If we're not thinking like servants, we're not thinking spiritually. We're just thinking in a mundane way.
Yes, and once again, Goswami, I agree with everything you say. The principles are all there, but I'm still very much at a loss, actually. So,
Okay, we can talk later.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that and
next
try
time.
to figure that one out. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Ananda Leela. It was very nice to see Krishna Sundari. And I've known her since she was, how old were you when I first met you?
About 6.
Like 6, I think.
6 years old. Yeah. Hardly changed.
I know.
Just kidding.
Still the same.
It's another one of those things. Just take the good part as a compliment and ignore the rest.
Okay, well, congratulations, Vidyananda Das. Thank you all very much. And we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.